Day 129. 2 Kings 7-9. Then Elisha said, Hear the word of the Lord. This is what the Lord says, about this time tomorrow at the gate of Samaria, a seah of fine flour will sell for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley will sell for a shekel. But the officer on whose arm the king leaned answered the man of God, Look, even if the Lord were to make windows in heaven. Could this really happen? You will see it with your own eyes, replied Elisha, but you will not eat any of it. Now there were 4 men with leprosy at the entrance of the city gate, and they said to one another, Why just sit here until we die? If we say, Let us go into the city, we will die there from the famine in the city, but if we sit here, we will also die. So come now, let us go over to the camp of the Arameans. If they let us live, we will live, if they kill us, we will die. So they arose at twilight and went to the camp of the Arameans. But when they came to the outskirts of the camp, there was not a man to be found. For the Lord had caused the Arameans to hear the sound of chariots, horses, and a great army, so that they said to one another, Look, the king of Israel must have hired the kings of the Hittites and Egyptians to attack us. Thus the Arameans had arisen and fled at twilight, abandoning their tents and horses and donkeys. The camp was intact, and they had run for their lives. When the lepers reached the edge of the camp, they went into a tent to eat and drink. Then they carried off the silver, gold, and clothing, and went and hid them. On returning, they entered another tent, carried off some items from there, and hid them. Finally, they said to one another, We are not doing what is right. Today is a day of good news. If we are silent and wait until morning light, our sin will overtake us. Now, therefore, let us go and tell the king's household. So they went and called out to the gatekeepers of the city, saying, We went to the Aramean camp and no one was there, not a trace, only tethered horses and donkeys, and the tents were intact. The gatekeepers shouted the news. And it was reported to the king's household. So the king got up in the night and said to his servants, Let me tell you what the Arameans have done to us. They know we are starving, so they have left the camp to hide in the field, thinking, When they come out of the city, we will take them alive and enter the city. But one of his servants replied, Please, have scouts take 5 of the horses that remain in the city. Their plight will be no worse than all the Israelites who are left here. You can see that all the Israelites here are doomed. So let us send them and find out. Then the scouts took 2 chariots with horses, and the king sent them after the Aramean army, saying, Go and see. And they tracked them as far as the Jordan, and indeed, the whole way was littered with the clothing and equipment the Arameans had thrown off in haste. So the scouts returned and told the king. Then the people went out and plundered the camp of the Arameans. It was then that a seah of fine flour sold for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley sold for a shekel, according to the word of the Lord. Now the king had appointed the officer on whose arm he leaned to be in charge of the gate, but the people trampled him in the gateway, and he died, just as the man of God had foretold when the king had come to him. It happened just as the man of God had told the king, about this time tomorrow at the gate of Samaria, 2 seahs of barley will sell for a shekel, and a seah of fine flour will sell for a shekel. And the officer had answered the man of God, Look, even if the Lord were to make windows in heaven. Could this really happen? So Elisha had replied, You will see it with your own eyes, but you will not eat any of it. And that is just what happened to him. The people trampled him in the gateway, and he died. Now Elisha had said to the woman whose son he had restored to life, Arise, you and your household, go and live as a foreigner wherever you can. For the Lord has decreed a 7-year famine, and it has already come to the land. So the woman had proceeded to do as the man of God had instructed. And she and her household lived as foreigners for 7 years in the land of the Philistines. At the end of 7 years, when the woman returned from the land of the Philistines, she went to the king to appeal for her house and her land. Now the king had been speaking to Gehazi, the servant of the man of God, saying, Please relate to me all the great things Elisha has done. And Gehazi was telling the king how Elisha had brought the dead back to life. Just then the woman whose son Elisha had revived came to appeal to the king for her house and her land. So Gehazi said, My lord the king, this is the woman, and this is the son Elisha restored to life. When the king asked the woman, she confirmed it. So the king appointed for her an officer, saying, Restore all that was hers, along with all the proceeds of the field from the day that she left the country until now. Then Elisha came to Damascus while Ben-Hadad king of Aram was sick, and the king was told, The man of God has come here. So the king said to Hazael, "Take a gift in your hand, go to meet the man of God, and inquire of the Lord through him, will I recover from this illness?" So Hazael went to meet Elisha, taking with him a gift of 40 camel loads of every good thing from Damascus. And he went in and stood before him and said, "Your son Ben-Hadad king of Aram has sent me to ask, will I recover from this illness?" Elisha answered, "Go and tell him, you will surely recover. But the Lord has shown me that in fact he will die." Elisha fixed his gaze steadily on him until Hazael became uncomfortable. Then the man of God began to weep. "Why is my Lord weeping?" asked Hazael. "Because I know the evil you will do to the Israelites," Elisha replied. "You will set fire to their fortresses, kill their young men with the sword, dash their little ones to pieces, and rip open their pregnant women. But how could your servant, a mere dog, do such a monstrous thing?" said Hazael. And Elisha answered, "The Lord has shown me that you will be king over Aram." So Hazael left Elisha and went to his master, who asked him, "What did Elisha say to you?" And he replied, "He told me that you would surely recover." But the next day Hazael took a thick cloth, dipped it in water, and spread it over the king's face. So Ben-Hadad died, and Hazael reigned in his place. In the 5th year of the reign of Joram son of Ahab over Israel, Jehoram son of Jehoshaphat succeeded his father as king of Judah. Jehoram was 32 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 8 years. And Jehoram walked in the ways of the kings of Israel, just as the house of Ahab had done. For he married a daughter of Ahab and did evil in the sight of the Lord. Yet for the sake of his servant David, the Lord was unwilling to destroy Judah, since he had promised to maintain a lamp for David and his descendants forever. In the days of Jehoram, Edom rebelled against the hand of Judah and appointed their own king. So Jehoram crossed over to Zair with all his chariots. When the Edomites surrounded him and his chariot commanders, he rose up and attacked by night. His troops, however, fled to their homes. So to this day Edom has been in rebellion against the hand of Judah. Likewise, Libnah rebelled at the same time. As for the rest of the acts of Jehoram, along with all his accomplishments, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? And Jehoram rested with his fathers and was buried with them in the city of David. And his son Ahaziah reigned in his place. In the 12th year of the reign of Joram son of Ahab over Israel, Ahaziah son of Jehoram became king of Judah. Ahaziah was 22 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 1 year. His mother's name was Athaliah, the granddaughter of Omri king of Israel. And Ahaziah walked in the ways of the house of Ahab and did evil in the sight of the Lord like the house of Ahab, for he was a son-in-law of the house of Ahab. Then Ahaziah went with Joram son of Ahab to fight against Hazael king of Aram at Ramoth-Gilead, and the Arameans wounded Joram. So King Joram returned to Jezreel to recover from the wounds that the Arameans had inflicted on him at Ramah when he fought against Hazael king of Aram. Then Ahaziah son of Jehoram king of Judah went down to Jezreel to visit Joram son of Ahab, because Joram had been wounded. Now Elisha the prophet summoned one of the sons of the prophets and said to him, "Tuck your cloak under your belt, take this flask of oil, and go to Ramoth-Gilead. When you arrive, look for Jehu son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi. Go in, get him away from his companions, and take him to an inner room. Then take the flask of oil, pour it on his head, and declare, 'This is what the Lord says, I anoint you king over Israel.' Then open the door and run. Do not delay." So the young prophet went to Ramoth-Gilead, and when he arrived, the army commanders were sitting there. "I have a message for you, commander," he said. "For which of us?" asked Jehu. "For you, commander," he replied. So Jehu got up and went into the house, where the young prophet poured the oil on his head and declared, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, I anoint you king over the Lord's people Israel. And you are to strike down the house of your master Ahab, so that I may avenge the blood of my servants the prophets and the blood of all the servants of the Lord shed by the hand of Jezebel. The whole house of Ahab will perish, and I will cut off from Ahab every male, both slave and free, in Israel. I will make the house of Ahab like the houses of Jeroboam son of Nebat and Baasha son of Ahijah. And on the plot of ground at Jezreel the dogs will devour Jezebel, and there will be no one to bury her." Then the young prophet opened the door and ran. When Jehu went out to the servants of his master, they asked, "Is everything all right? Why did this madman come to you?" "You know his kind and their babble," he replied. "That is a lie," they said. "Tell us now." So Jehu answered, he talked to me about this and that, and he said, this is what the Lord says, I anoint you king over Israel. Quickly, each man took his garment and put it under Jehu on the bare steps. Then they blew the ram's horn and proclaimed, Jehu is king. Thus Jehu son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi, conspired against Joram. Now Joram and all Israel had been defending Ramoth-Gilead against Hazael king of Aram, but King Joram had returned to Jezreel to recover from the wounds he had suffered at the hands of the Arameans in the battle against Hazael their king. So Jehu said, if you commanders wish to make me king, then do not let anyone escape from the city to go and tell it in Jezreel. Then Jehu got into his chariot and went to Jezreel, because Joram was laid up there and Ahaziah king of Judah had gone down to see him. Now the watchman standing on the tower in Jezreel saw Jehu's troops approaching, and he called out, I see a company of troops. Choose a rider, Joram commanded. Send him out to meet them and ask, have you come in peace? So a horseman rode off to meet Jehu and said, this is what the king asks, have you come in peace? What do you know about peace? Jehu replied, fall in behind me. And the watchman reported, the messenger reached them, but he is not coming back. So the king sent out a second horseman, who went to them and said, this is what the king asks, have you come in peace? What do you know about peace? Jehu replied, fall in behind me. Again the watchman reported, he reached them, but he is not coming back. And the charioteer is driving like Jehu son of Nimshi, he is driving like a madman. Harness. Joram shouted, and they harnessed his chariot. Then Joram king of Israel and Ahaziah king of Judah set out, each in his own chariot, and met Jehu on the property of Naboth the Jezreelite. When Joram saw Jehu, he asked, have you come in peace, Jehu? How can there be peace, he replied, as long as the idolatry and witchcraft of your mother Jezebel abound. Joram turned around and fled, calling out to Ahaziah, treachery, Ahaziah. Then Jehu drew his bow and shot Joram between the shoulders. The arrow pierced his heart, and he slumped down in his chariot. And Jehu said to Bidkar his officer, pick him up and throw him into the field of Naboth the Jezreelite. For remember that when you and I were riding together behind his father Ahab, the Lord lifted up this burden against him, as surely as I saw the blood of Naboth and the blood of his sons yesterday, declares the Lord, so will I repay you on this plot of ground, declares the Lord. Now then, according to the word of the Lord, pick him up and throw him on the plot of ground. When King Ahaziah of Judah saw this, he fled up the road toward Beth-Hagan. And Jehu pursued him, shouting, shoot him too. So they shot Ahaziah in his chariot on the ascent of Gur near Ibleam, and he fled to Megiddo and died there. Then his servants carried him by chariot to Jerusalem and buried him with his fathers in his tomb in the city of David. In the 11th year of Joram son of Ahab, Ahaziah had become king over Judah. Now when Jehu arrived in Jezreel, Jezebel heard of it. So she painted her eyes, adorned her head, and looked down from a window. And as Jehu entered the gate, she asked, have you come in peace, O Zimri, murderer of your master? He looked up at the window and called out, who is on my side? Who? And 2 or 3 eunuchs looked down at him. Throw her down, yelled Jehu. So they threw her down, and her blood splattered on the wall and on the horses as they trampled her underfoot. Then Jehu went in and ate and drank. Take care of this cursed woman, he said, and bury her, for she was the daughter of a king. But when they went out to bury her, they found nothing but her skull, her feet, and the palms of her hands. So they went back and told Jehu, who replied, this is the word of the Lord, which he spoke through his servant Elijah the Tishbite, on the plot of ground at Jezreel the dogs will devour the flesh of Jezebel. And Jezebel's body will lie like dung in the field on the plot of ground at Jezreel, so that no one can say, this is Jezebel. John 1 verses 1 to 28. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made, and without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There came a man who was sent from God. His name was John. He came as a witness to testify about the light, so that through him everyone might believe. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify about the light. The true light who gives light to every man was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. But to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, children born not of blood, nor of the desire or will of man, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. John testified concerning him. He cried out, saying, This is he of whom I said, He who comes after me has surpassed me because he was before me. From his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, but the one and only Son, who is himself God and is at the Father's side, has made him known. And this was John's testimony when the Jews of Jerusalem sent priests and Levites to ask him, Who are you? He did not refuse to confess, but openly declared, I am not the Christ. Then who are you? They inquired. Are you Elijah? He said, I am not. Are you the prophet? He answered, No. So they said to him, Who are you? We need an answer for those who sent us. What do you say about yourself? John replied in the words of Isaiah the prophet, I am a voice of one calling in the wilderness, make straight the way for the Lord. Then the Pharisees who had been sent asked him, Why then do you baptize, if you are not the Christ, nor Elijah, nor the prophet? I baptize with water, John replied, but among you stands one you do not know. He is the one who comes after me, the straps of whose sandals I am not worthy to untie. All this happened at Bethany beyond the Jordan, where John was baptizing.